Hello there. The Labour Party conference has come out in favour of proportional representation, and the Labour Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary has set some serious hairs running. So, one of the two major political parties in the UK that has won elections in the past under first past the post and will probably win the next one in the same way is now backing proportional representation. But Labour is now under fire after their Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary Peter Kyle said that he would not get in the way of a united Ireland. More on that one in a minute. Yes, the Labour Party conference motion calling for proportional representation to be in the next Labour manifesto received overwhelming support. The vote for it was passed after a huge showing of hands in support for it. And as an aside, to get into that conference to vote, you had to show your Labour Party ID. And here was me thinking that lefty Labour thinks that voter IDs are undemocratic because they prevent poor people and minorities from voting. Seems that policy only applies outside of their party conferences. And how many poor Labour Party members could afford to get to that conference to make their voices heard? Anyway, this motion is not binding on the party leadership, and Keir Starmer has already said that he will not be following it up, as it was not a priority for him. Yes, he knows the dangers of handing more democracy out to the people. We might end up with the wrong sort of MPs sat on those green benches, or the wrong party in charge. Think Sweden and Italy. It would almost certainly also rob any party of a true majority, forcing them to make unholy alliances, so allowing the tail to furiously wag the dog. By that I mean allow more political parties to be represented in the House of Commons, forcing MPs to negotiate amongst each other for the best solution, rather than just using the steamroller of a majority to force policies through. But on the other side of the coin, it could lead to political paralysis, where big decisions and large-scale infrastructure is concerned. And if you think the Tories, the party that has benefited most from first past the post, is going to embrace proportional representations, you've got another think coming. And remember, the Tories have legislated to change the mayoral and police and crime commissioner elections from the PR voting system they were set up with to first past the post. So trying to get them to change to PR for a general election would be a waste of time. Now many people will point to the 2011 referendum in the UK, where the electorate firmly rejected PR for Westminster elections by nearly 7 million votes, a 35% majority. So the claim will be made that PR is dead. Now that 2011 referendum came about as a result of the Tory Lib Dem coalition, as one of the coalition sops made by David Cameron to his partner in crime Nick Clegg. But craftily the Tories ensured that the referendum was a choice between first past the post and something called the alternative vote, probably the worst system of PR around at the time. Hardly surprising, is it, that the Tories pulled that one? The Tories will be very, very reluctant to give up their route to ensuring a majority government for them for at least 50% of the time. The Electoral Reform Society called this vote at the Labour conference a huge moment for democracy and went on to say, "Now all major parties, bar the Conservatives, are united on the need for electoral reform and committed to delivering a fair electoral system where every vote counts." But they do go on to say, as I pointed out just now, that it needs the support of the Labour leader Keir Starmer, as did the campaign group Make Votes Matter. Now there does seem to be growing support for proportional representation. But what we don't want is another stitch-up as in 2011, by giving voters a referendum choice between the status quo and something much worse. Any future referendum needs to be two-stage, with the first stage being proportional representation, yes or no, and the second stage where people are asked that if PR ended up being used, to rank maybe 4 pre-selected but different PR voting systems in order of preference. And the question needs to be trailed for months to give people time to find out how each system operates and to hear the debates or even take part in them. But all of this is a pipe dream at the moment. The leadership of the two main parties have set their faces against PR because they know it would sound the death knell of their exclusive two-party state. PR would give other parties massive exposure in the press, and it could, in time, lead to a significant shift in political power. It might also stop the continual flip-flop from left to right and back again once or twice every decade. But there is the question of large infrastructure projects. Would HS2 have ever got through a parliament that was occupied by MPs born of a PR system? Do we risk having paralysis across the board on matters of defence, energy security and food security, for example, with the only consensus being ever more net zero and ever more wokeness? Or would PR save us from those last two? Or put us deeper in the mire? Well, that would be down to two things: who we vote for and which political parties the press and big tech allow to have their voices heard, just like today. So maybe we need to deal with that glaring lack of free speech elephant in the room before we start looking at PR voting. Now on to Peter Kyle, the Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary. Talking to the BBC, he promised that he would not be a barrier to the unification of North and South Ireland. Now that really has put a couple of cats among the pigeons. The loyalist community in Northern Ireland already feels stressed over the harsh EU implementation of the Northern Ireland Protocol, with the imposition of a trade barrier within the UK down the Irish Sea, something that cuts Northern Ireland off from the UK and therefore comprehensively breaches the Belfast Agreement. And DUP MP Sammy Wilson told The Express, "As we've seen in Scotland, as soon as you start talking about a border poll, those who want to break up the UK become obsessed about that." Labour seem quite happy for Northern Ireland to break away from the rest of the United Kingdom. It is a very dangerous position given what is happening in Scotland. If Labour wants to claim to be a party of the Union, then it has got to be a party for the whole Union, not part of the Union. Peter Kyle knows a border poll, or even talk of a border poll, does not add stability to Northern Ireland. In fact, all it does is distract from the real issues that need to be addressed. Now, Peter Kyle campaigned for Remain, so I suspect that the only union he's really interested in is the European Union. And it continues to amaze me how many people are completely oblivious to the pro-UK unionist East-West angle to the whole Northern Ireland issue, something protected by the Belfast Agreement. And that is a dangerous ignorance to have. Can you imagine the repercussions of having a thoughtless and ill-timed border poll in Northern Ireland, where the result is a wafer-thin 0.5% split, one way or the other?